Hey, Dr. O, one of I think the talking points that's kind of out there in the marketplace of ideas, and there is, this is in my view, this is a nonpartisan issue. I mean, we know, conservative people that are really not feeling it with the tariffs. And we certainly know people who are left of center who are absolutely not feeling it with the tariffs. I mean, I think that group is largely, I would say, not to draw a straight line, but anything that President Trump wants to do, they're not interested in it.
And Chris, again, I like that you brought this up because this is not about politics. It's straight up economics. It's decades of economic research. It's, if not centuries of economic research. And we had a recent example, the 2018. What did we see during that, recent example? 175,000 fewer job openings. Right? That's a problem, right? And
there are people that, they're saying, that we should just simply cease, forward direction on tariffs. And okay, it's an interesting concept. Roll them all back to either what they were prior to the Trump administration, which, it's not as if we didn't have tariffs in place. We certainly had tariffs in place, and our, global trade partners had tariffs in place for us and the goods that are produced in the United States. But economically, what would happen to the U.S. economy? And I would ask you to extrapolate on this to the global economy if we just eliminated tariffs altogether. And this is a purely, an academic exercise.
yeah, I mean, it's quite the up. So you have a couple of things. Tariffs are a tax. I think ultimately people need to understand that tariffs are a tax. And so if you're taxing economic activity, you're going to get less economic activity, over time, right? Not immediately, but over time. And so immediately, what do you get when you implement tariffs? You get a big surge in additional revenue, tax revenue from tariffs. But as you get that surge in tariff revenue, there's a cost, right? Because everything has a cost. There's no free lunch. And the cost is people change their behavior in order to avoid paying the tariff, right? And as their behavior changes, what does that mean by people change their behavior? Well, for consumers who are essentially paying the tax, they are going to adjust by shifting their consumption to if they can't avoid it, of course, shifting their consumption to buy goods and services from places that are not, from countries that are not being tariffed, that are not faced with these trade restrictions. And that's what we saw in 2018, right? We had a shift in behavior towards those industries where you basically had, that weren't facing the tariffs. And so that's the important change here. You had the affected industries, of course, were farming, construction, were the most affected by the tariffs. And so I think that's what, we need to worry about. And so if you were to reverse things, well, okay, we'll get less tax revenue, but then you wouldn't get, right? You hopefully wouldn't get, these businesses that are not squeezed would not kind of slow down, their hiring or expansion plans, and would be able to actually go ahead and continue to do what they would have done in the absence of the tariffs, right? And so that is kind of what I expect to come from a reversal.
Well, let me toss a couple of numbers at you. I mean, to further, I guess, set the context. I mean, the White House released, like a monthly report on tariff revenue collected, and also, a year to date revenue collected. And, for the month of September, I guess this would be like literally through maybe September 29th. I mean, I'm not exactly sure the cutoff date on this. It's probably the last business day of the month of September. It showed up at, $31 million, or excuse me, $31 billion.
Yeah.
And so, from there, I mean, it's like the total year, amount is, $215 billion. So there's some there. Now, if you take a look at the reporting that's been done on this, and I mean, and I think that's important because it speaks specifically to your point that the payers for that are representative by about 50% of Americans, that the burden for those tariffs have fallen on Americans to a degree of about 50%. So, with that data in mind, what might you be able to offer in terms of, what if the, tariffs come off entirely? Certainly the burden that's being placed on Americans goes away, but so does a significant amount of foreign revenue.
Of tax revenue. That's right. It all disappears. If you stop it today, right? It's all gone, right? And then over time, you see a shift in economic activity back to the affected industries, back to the, right? And so that's what I expect to see. Also, I think what was the reason for the tariffs? I think the reason for the tariffs has been, and we've seen this from, both political parties, right? Over many, many decades, is to bring back some, manufacturing to the U.S. It's to protect local industries, but there's no evidence that that's ever worked. Even in the 2018, in the case of the 2018 tariffs, what we saw is actually U.S. firms gained a little bit of market share, but they did not expand employment. So what you ended up with is, yes, a few winners, but so many more losers. Including U.S. consumers, right? So if you were not particularly a shareholder or owning one of these industries, one of these firms that actually benefited from the increase in market share, right? Which, by the way, their workers did not benefit either, right? Only the owners of those few firms, right? If you were not a participant, if you were not one of those, you were a major loser, right? So again, picking winners and losers never really works, is what economic data tells us. And, it's not, it has nothing to do with politics. We're just talking straight economic research, and evidence from the past. Right. And so does it benefit, employment? No, it hurts employment, of Americans over the long run. And so I think, ultimately, a reversal would benefit Americans greatly, which is why even Fed Governor Stephen Miron, who of course was appointed by the president very recently, is out there saying, look, as long as there's no resolution on the trade front, it actually could hurt economic growth and would necessitate further rate cuts. Again, he's been remember, he was the last one. He was dissenting, wanting a larger rate cut at the last Fed meeting. And so he's thinking a lot of the policies that are in place could actually require larger rate cuts in order to sustain, to keep the economic activity from deteriorating very rapidly. And his point is that economic policy, Fed policy is very restrictive right now, given the policy environment. And so it's not my words, necessarily. It's kind of the consensus, including, the words of the newly appointed Fed governor,
Stephen Miron. Yeah.
Stephen Miron.
But let me ask one final question, and I'd ask you to be as succinct as you possibly can be. You pull the tariffs off, and yeah, that burden on U.S. consumers, and certainly some small businesses go away, but that larger chunk of revenue also goes away. what's the net effect of that in the economy as you understand it right now?
It's good for the economy, right? It's more economic. It should result in more economic activity. And so that's the net result. Of course, you might argue that, we need to close the deficit, and you might argue.
I think there should be some argument for that.
Right. Exactly. And so what's the best way to close the deficit? Is the best way to close the deficit raising taxes or trying to expand our tax base? And I'm just not going to bother commenting on that. I think you know exactly where I stand on this. I think ultimately the best way to get sustainable to improve the path of the fiscal path of this country is, of course, to deal with entitlements. We know entitlement reform is long overdue, and to expand the tax base as much as possible, as opposed to raising taxes.
Well, I mean, I think certainly, and we got to bring it to a close, but I think certainly, a major part of the standoff that exists, right now in the government shutdown would be select entitlement programs being specifically addressed, and that being, a major source of disagreement between the Republicans and the Democrats. So, Orphe, always fun to talk with you. And this is one of those subjects that, I mean, it's like we've talked a lot about tariffs, but I think the idea of talking about, okay, so what if you did get rid of the tariffs? What would happen? I think that was a good starting point, and encourage everybody to go out and do their own research and certainly follow the Center Square. We do spend a fair amount of our time, effort, and energy, writing about the economy and specifically talking about tariffs. So for Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure you listen to Dr. O and me every week on the Center Square Radio Hour.